So, folks, this is what we need to know. Going forward, starting this football season in 2024, there are 12 teams that will make the playoffs. 5 of those are going to be selected as the 5 highest ranked conference champions. So, we've got the 4 Power Fives that that makes a whole lot of sense. We've got the 4 Power Fives, the 4 Power Fours, I guess they are now, the 4 power conferences, which there's an assumption that we can all make that they will be 4 of the 5 that will make it, but there will be 5 conference champions that automatically receive a bid based on being the 5 highest ranked conference champions. Then the next 7 teams will be selected based on the college football playoff rankings, the at-large bids. And so that's really at the crux of what all this is. The only thing that is an oddity in this, at least for this particular season, is that the Pac-12 still exists technically. There are 2 teams in the Pac-12, and they will exist in that conference this year. They will play each other, and they are technically in the Pac-12 conference, and that's Washington State and Oregon State. But they will not comprise a conference that is being treated as a conference toward the playoff. So they cannot say, hey, we get a playoff spot because we've got a conference champion. But they are just kind of in this just nowhere land as it pertains to a conference affiliation or as it pertains to a playoff. They're piecing together schedules that generally are Mountain West Conference schedules. So that's kind of an oddity for them. And that's one of the reasons this has been held up for a couple months is what do we do with the Pac-12 and now the Pac-12 carnage? And what do we do with those teams? Well, they're going to be treated as at-large teams. They cannot win a conference, even though they technically are still their own conference.
So just to clarify, is there a conference championship between those 2 teams?
I was asking myself the same question as I was going through the article that was released today to think, okay, well, they play in the regular season. Will they just go ahead and play a conference championship game and whoever wins, regardless of what their record is?
You know what they
before
should
that?
do? Yeah, I'm serious. If they're playing a bunch of Mountain West teams, would it be better? I'm serious. Listen to this. Would it be better for their schedule to just play one time, or would it be better to play best 2 out of 3 and then sprinkle in a bunch of Mountain West teams around it?
Yeah. Well, they're playing 6. So I don't know what the rest of their schedule looks like. And then they're playing each other. So that's 7. So they're
Oh,
playing
no, but
5 other teams out there.
I mean, what are the 5 other teams? Are they Power 5 teams?
I'd have to look at the schedules.
The reason I ask is because if you could grab as an independent, a de facto independent, which is what those teams are, even though they're scheduling Mountain West schools, I'd be like, hey, I'd figure out a way. I hope those 2 schools, because I don't want to see those 2 teams, those programs go to the dumps. Those have been solid football programs over recent time. I would hope that those 2 programs can figure out a way to work together. And I'm sure they'll find a home, right? Like if Arizona State can find a home, why can't Oregon State and Washington State, other than maybe just the connection that Arizona State had with Arizona? And, I know that wasn't quite apples to apples as it relates to what Oregon did with the Big Ten. By the way, let me just clarify something. So this was my first question when I read that announcement, and I haven't dove as deep as you probably have into this so far today. The top 5 conference champions, as in the ones that are ranked the highest, make the playoff. So that sounds simple. And maybe I'm overcomplicating it in my own mind. But why is it 5? Why are we insisting on having 5 conference champions when there is not a Power 5 anymore?
So the previous model was 6 and 6, meaning the top 6 conference champions made it, which we would presume to be the 5 Power 5 champions plus a group of 5 champion. So now they've just sized it down to 1 less.
The only issue I have with that is, have we taken on the name Power 4 or the quantifier Power 4? Because those 4 conferences, you and I both know those 4 conferences are not equal right now.
No.
So That'd be my only issue. You get 12 playoff spots, so you're not going to fill the playoff with 10 SEC and Big Ten teams, and then 2 teams from other conferences. I understand that, but you're going to get 7. You're going to get 7 at-large bids. Basically, what I'm saying is you're going to have only of those first 5 in. You're only going to get 1 team from the Big Ten and 1 team from the SEC. So then the other at-larges, you have 7 at-larges from there on out. So the most each conference, like combined, the most the Big Ten / SEC could get in with the current structure is 9 between the 2 of them. There will be at least 3 non-Big Ten SEC schools that get in.
Yes.
That's all I just, with the lack of parity with the conferences now, the clear lack of parity, that's the only reason I kind of question how effective is that model per se. But I don't know how effective you can make it, because I don't know what the structure of the top end of conference or alignment, what we should label that, how we should organize things. I just don't know.
I posted a video this week where I basically laid out what reasonably we could expect out of the Big Ten in particular in terms of playoff bids. And so I looked at the last 10 years, included the teams from the Pac-12, which of course, this is an inexact and very imperfect undertaking because the schedules are going to be different. The teams are going to be different in regards to their records. But let's just take 2023 and consider that if you infuse the 4 teams from the West Coast, that Washington, Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan all would qualify for a playoff. So that's 5. But let's even take into consideration, sure, they're going to be playing each other, some other difficult games. So they're going to incur more losses. But all of those teams were safely, except maybe Penn State with 2 losses, safely within a 12-team playoff. So even if Ohio State would have lost another game, Washington another 1 or 2, Michigan another 1 or 2, Oregon another game, they're all going to make the playoff in a year such as what we experienced this past year. I think that's on the high end. I would expect on average that the Big Ten would have 4 teams in a 12-team playoff field.
And by the way, I know some people are going to, when I say, the most the Big Ten and the SEC can get in combined is 9 teams, some people are going to be like, well, why? That's insane to think that those 2 conferences combined could get 9 teams in. There's 18 teams in the Big Ten. That's an average of 4.5 per conference. When you have, the Big Ten occupying at least 5 of the top 10 programs right now in the country, and the SEC probably occupying the other 5. Maybe Florida State or Miami should be in those conversations. Probably not. When's the last time you've ranked programs nationally? Just the brand, the football brand that they are.
Oh, not talking about how good they are on the field?
No. That's the program includes tradition and trajectory, all that stuff. Success.
I do that every off season, but I include the current state of the program.
I guess that's what I'm saying. Like maybe I'm just ranting on this, but you have a lot of big brands in these 2 conferences. So 4.5 per is not that many teams when you think
exactly the way you just broke it down. It is not ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous on the surface until you just broke it down to 4.5 out of 18 and 16. And it's not ridiculous, especially considering that at the end of last season, the SEC and the Big Ten comprised the entire top 10, meaning the future Big Ten and SEC comprised the entire top 10.
I think what'll be interesting, and I haven't studied recent rankings, like rankings from past years as much, especially as it relates to Group of 5 schools. But I think it'll be interesting to see what the distribution looks like for some of those G5 schools, or what we previously considered to be G5 conferences, because how many times have we had, a 1-loss Toledo, a 1-loss Coastal Carolina? There's still going to be that might be where there's the most controversy as it relates to rankings, right? Like it's hard to blame the committee for not putting a 9-3 Iowa team in. You got 3 losses, right? Like, you should have won more games. But if you're Toledo and you go, 12-1, win the MAC, but Coastal Carolina gets in at 12-1 because they were ranked one spot higher, that's going to suck for Toledo Rockets fans. And I guess that's the name of the game. You can't put every, 1 or 2 loss G5 program in, but I could see that still being a point of contention for a lot of those smaller programs.
What
Troy,
I find to be counterproductive in this, and I think I just did a live stream taking calls and so forth. I think I called it moronic, actually, is that at the same time that we are now officially including the group of 5. So previously they were considered, but there wasn't an official seat at the table, and only one broke through in 10 years, that being Cincinnati in 2021. So now we are officially including a spot where there was no spot. The group of 5 has been diminished. So when the group of 5 was better with Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, BYU, and SMU, that is now joining the ACC, the best programs in the group of 5, when it was being excluded, were out there to participate, and now they're in the Power 5, and so the group of 5 has been weakened considerably. Now we're giving them a spot at the table.
But there have been like some of the programs I mentioned, Toledo, Troy, Liberty. A lot of those teams are the Coastal Carolina. Those are the teams that have what are you looking at me like that for?
That have what?
That have had 12-1 seasons
against a bunch of crap.
Okay, well, Coastal Carolina, well, Troy, Liberty, those teams I just named, those teams have been ranked. They've been top 25
They
teams.
shouldn't be ranked.
I know you don't have them in your hold up your shirt.
Be ranked unless they earn
your shirt for a second.
Yeah, so if you've just joined us here in the last few months, it's the top 25 that actually makes sense. And I've got nothing against those schools. I truly don't. If they earn that ranking.
But that's the whole point, Mark. That's the whole point of having at least one spot for them at the table. It's not to get, you're basically, when you're just allowing a spot for a team like Cincinnati that was playing in the American Conference, a spot, you're just saying, well, the AAC is the next strongest conference. Why don't we open it to all the quote unquote weak conferences and figure out a way to get the best team of the weak conferences? I think we still accomplish that through this structure.
Yes. I was just making the point that group of teams in the group of 5, all those conferences, that has been weakened greatly. And so it's just ironic in a bad way that now they get the opportunity to represent the group of 5 when the group of 5 isn't anywhere close to as good as it was just a couple of years ago. They've lost their best programs.
So my question is, Mark, since we've gone to the 14 playoff, you mentioned Cincinnati. How many programs from the G5 that was previously in place, what were the top 2 programs each year? Can you recite those teams at the end of the year, at the end of the season?
Yeah.
Okay, who were they? Were they always from the AAC? Were they always Cincinnati, BYU?
So you had Houston, UCF, Cincinnati dominating that landscape as the top team. Now, Boise State was in 2014. Houston was in 2015. And Central Michigan was it was PJ's team. Western Michigan in 2016 was technically, it's almost, but again, we're going back to the rankings. So my example for this past season in 2023 is that Liberty received that group of 5 position in the New Year's 6. I thought that SMU was a better team. They were 11-2. They won the American Conference. And who did SMU lose to? Well, they lost to 2 Power 5 teams. Liberty did not play a Power 5 team. SMU plays in a better conference, but Liberty got the nod to play in the New Year's 6 and got completely annihilated.
Shouldn't this encourage some of those G5 programs to, like a Toledo, a Liberty, shouldn't this incite them to schedule better? Or am I crazy in thinking that? Because now that they know, hey, if we impress the committee enough to be ranked higher and we can win even our week conference, hey, if we can knock off somebody in the non-conference, now we got a shot, a reasonable chance.
Or look capable, play well, compete.
Well, just help the strength of schedule, right? I mean, have somebody on your resume. It's like an NCAA tournament resume in basketball that, you're just not playing anybody either way. You can't even get I think playing, so I'd rather play somebody and get throttled because at least you went out there and played them than just beat a bunch of teams and have nothing to look at. Maybe that's not how the tournament committee looks at it. Maybe that's not how the playoff committee will look at things.
Yeah, and it's not as though I've never ranked group of 5 teams. I'm just, again, I don't understand this mentality we see out of the AP voters every year. So, for example, Liberty this past year played a deplorable schedule. Not their fault, but they played a deplorable schedule. And they're moving along the season, progressing at 6-0, 7-0, 8-0. And at some point, the AP voters just decide, okay, they're 9-0 now, or they're 10-0 now. We're going to rank them. They just beat another horrible team. They just beat another bottom of the rung, one of the worst 10 or 15 teams in the country. But we're just going to magically decide that this is the week that, because now they're 10-0 or they're 9-0, we're going to rank them. I think it's been proven down through the years. Shoot, I have yet to produce this video. I've run through every Power 5 versus Group of 5 matchup from this past season to run down just the disparity, just to emphasize and underline the disparity between the two levels of play. I think I said to you at one point when we were having one of our bowl conversations that I looked at all the Group of 5 champions and how well they played in bowl games against Power 5 teams, and it was terrible. Or no, how well they played against Power 5 teams in the bowl games and in their regular season games. They were like 2-13.
How many mid-major, and you may not know this, how many mid-major AQ teams are there in college basketball? In a
Aren't there like
tournament?
Aren't there like 315 or 20 Division I college basketball teams?
That sounds about right. But
so
I mean,
you're talking about the automatic qualify. I got you.
Yeah, so you have
It's
at least
about half the field, isn't it?
Well, so I guess that's my point. I don't think it's quite half the field, but that's my point. Is your argument, if you were doing college basketball, would be that's ridiculous as well, because I guarantee you, we know that we can't even. It's like part of it is that's the sport. Like you have an opportunity as those. I think that's the great thing about college basketball. You give those minor league teams an opportunity to make the postseason and compete with the big boys, where in reality, would the top 68 teams in college basketball, would only half of those teams be from Power 5 if you just looked at resume and if you were actually able to look at talent, everything that we put into evaluating a team or a program? No, probably 90% of the top 68 teams in college basketball would be from a Power 5 conference, but that's kind of part of the excitement of being able to play your season. I think I don't mind that. I know it's a smaller field to work with, so devoting one spot, but you're also, like I said, in college basketball, you're devoting 20 to 30 spots. By the way,
I guess I'm representing myself as an elitist, and I'm not, because I do enjoy the college basketball approach to it. But that's just the limitations to college football is because of the physicality of the sport. You can't play all those games.
Real quickly, just so Ed Rogers is aware, he made a comment a couple minutes ago how and he says we like he played in the game. We put 70 on Toledo a couple of years ago. He's talking about the Buckeyes. Didn't the previous meeting between those two, which was like I remember that game back in, I believe it was 2011. Wasn't that like a 3-point game or something like that? It was a 1-score game.
Yes.
Against Toledo.
Yes.
So,
that was the worst Ohio State team in the last 25 years.
But I'm just saying, you're bringing up one result. They don't play each other very often.
Absolutely.
And that was that was a pretty good Toledo team that Ohio State did put a lot of points on.
Yeah.
And I believe Toledo were their offensive numbers? How many did they score in that game?
21. I think it was 77-21.
Okay, so their defense was terrible, and Ohio State's offense was incredible. But were Toledo's numbers better than the final score, like offensive numbers in that game? Or am I wrong?
I don't remember. I couldn't tell you. I remember that was the season that Ohio State and Iowa played, because I think that was one of those funny statistics that we were running through before the Ohio State-Iowa game, because I think Ohio State scored more touchdowns in that game than Iowa had entering the game against Ohio State.
Yeah, I'm just looking here to see what the team statistics were. Yeah, so Ohio State, the 307 yards of total offense for Toledo. How did Ohio State go for 763 yards of offense in that game? Was that game was they don't play that game ever at Toledo, right? That game was in the shoe.
Oh yeah.
That's
when
one
is the
thing
last time Iowa traveled to a group of 5? I'm amazed when big brands in the Power 5 will travel to a group of 5. Ohio State won't do that. Iowa won't do that.
Well, I watched a game. It was in the. I mean, they've done it in the Ferentz era. They did it. Who did they play? Was it like Arkansas State on the road?
Really?
I know they played at Northern Illinois. Was it?
Did they?
Look this up. You're challenging me on this. I got to look it up. Iowa versus Northern Illinois. Well, they played at Soldier Field against Northern Illinois. That probably wouldn't count, right?
No, I'm not counting that. When did they play on campus at a group of 5? I don't remember that happening.
Let me look here. I'm pretty sure they played. We're going to find this out. At Northern, let's see here, 2018.
And while you're looking that up, I just want to make it clear that I am not against the group of 5 being represented in the playoff. It's just you're deciding that we are going to play a playoff with basically the 11 best teams in the country, not exactly, but probably just very close to the 11 best teams in the country, and then like the 50th best team in the country.
Well, maybe they didn't play it. I guess the 2 meetings they had against Northern Illinois were at Soldier Field. I remember they had 2 of them, and they were both at Soldier Field. There was somebody, though. Somebody helped me out in the chat. Was it Arkansas State they played? It would have been like back in the probably either Brad Banks era or Drew Tate era would be my guess. I'll have to find. Yeah, it must not have been DeKalb, but anyways, while I'm looking this up, Mark, do we want to? What was the other thing we were going to address here at the outset of the show?
Well, let's address Erica's comment here about Vegas and the win total released. I don't know that. I know we discussed Iowa's schedule and possibilities of competing in the Big Ten, getting to the playoff. I don't know if the win total had been released by Vegas at the point that we met last week, but Erica's saying, so how about the blatant disrespect from Vegas again this year? LOL, we will win more than 7.5 games. And I agree with you, Erica. And I generally defend Vegas to a certain extent when people bring up win totals and say, oh, that's ridiculous and that's ridiculous and look at that, because Vegas generally proves to know what they're talking about. And even if they miss on a team, it's a team that we all missed on. So they missed just as badly as the rest of us. But you are right, Erica. Last year, Corey and I both sat here and just could not believe that win total was 7.5. And here we are 1 year later, and we're looking at that same win total. And again, cannot believe 7.5.
Well, I haven't said that. No. I have not said that, but I would agree. I would agree with you.
Okay.
I would agree with you. I'm looking up these seasons. So, and I'm just going back here. I might as well talk you through this as we go here. So in 2009, they played. No, 2009 was the Arkansas State game they played in Kinnick. I'll keep looking here, Mark.
Our guy on the screen here.
Ah, yes, I knew it was a MAC team. I said Northern Illinois. I knew it was a MAC team.
I vaguely remember this game. That was again against Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah, that's why I looked at it. That's why I was watching it. Yes, that was. Let me go back to 2002. It was an 11-2 Iowa team.
Yep.
That scheduled a game at Miami, Ohio, 29.
And that's a game
24.
they lost in the regular season, right?
No, they won that one.
Oh, but they lost to somebody out, Iowa State probably, because they went undefeated in the Big
Yes.
Ten.
They
Yeah.
blew a lead to Iowa State. 31-36 was the game against Iowa
Mm.
State. Yeah, they played at Yager Stadium in Oxford, Ohio.
What was the score of that game?
29-24.
Hmm.
This says it was on ESPN Plus, but was ESPN Plus in existence at that time? Or was
I think
ESPN
so.
Plus something else back then?
I think it was.
But it wasn't like ESPN Plus now. What was ESPN
That
Plus
was
back then?
that was my first year at ESPN.
Yeah, but ESPN Plus is a streaming service now. So what was ESPN Plus back then?
It was something like that. I think it was an added cable tier
Okay.
is what it was. You paid extra, got all these random channels that showed, yes, Hummus Hero, ESPN 360. That's what it was. Yeah, that's what it was
Yeah,
called.
I remember that. I remember ESPN 360. Why? Let me ask you, why would they have scheduled? I wonder why they scheduled that game. Like, what was the reason for scheduling it?
Yeah, I don't know why anyone of Iowa status would go travel somewhere like that.
Even back then?
Actually, if you look at many of these teams' schedules, I can't speak for Iowa. I don't remember their non-conference schedules going back into the 80s and 90s off the top of my head, except for the big teams they played. Is a lot of this scheduling of these smaller group of 5 teams, this is a newer concept to college football.
Not for Iowa.
Like if you go back and look at Michigan's schedules every year, like in the early 90s, it's pretty crazy.
What do you mean? It's pretty crazy.
They're playing like Colorado, Virginia, and Oklahoma.
Oh, you're just saying playing those non G5, no non
Yeah,
G5
like
schools in
they
general.
didn't play anyone in the group of 5 back then.
Okay, I'm seeing a game at Syracuse. Yeah, I think that one against Miami, Ohio was the only one in the Ferentz era that they've played where they traveled to. I'm pretty sure. Let me check 2007. Yeah, I don't think
1990, Michigan's out of conference schedule. Notre Dame, UCLA, and Maryland. In
Okay.
1989, Notre Dame, UCLA, and Maryland. In 1988, Notre Dame, Miami of Florida, and Wake Forest. 87, Notre Dame, Washington State. They played Long Beach State. Okay, there's one in 3 years. 86, Michigan's playing Notre Dame, Oregon State, and Florida State. This, yeah.
Well, it's kind of like college basketball that a lot of Iowa fans are frustrated by the fact that they don't play Drake and UNI anymore. It used to be, and even when growing up, I loved that game. That was, they'd play at Drake, they'd play at UNI, and the women still do that, but the men won't do it.
But my point is,
Iowa State or Iowa.
Taking Michigan as an example, they're not playing any bad teams. None. 1986, Notre Dame, South Carolina, and Maryland. That's their out of conference get. This is every year.
And who did Michigan play? Was it last year or the year before that they had that horrendous non-conference schedule?
The
It was last
2
year.
years. The last 2 years, they played no one.
Yeah, see, that doesn't make sense to me. And the national champions, they earned it
Yeah,
down
they
the
backed
stretch.
it up. Yeah. They've got Texas this year.
Good. That's just, I mean, I think that's ridiculous for a power, especially the expanded playoff. You can afford to lose games. Go out and play somebody.